We were waiting for some more colleagues and participants to join, but I think we can start now since our resource person, Professor Kumar Suresh, he has sharp at 3 o'clock. So I think we should not keep him waiting, and we should begin the session. We expect that 5, 6 participants who are also expected to join would join eventually. So today we have a session on understanding inclusion and diversity, access and equity. And this session is being, we are very honored that it's being taken by a very senior professor in the area of inclusion, Professor Kumar Suresh. Professor Kumar Suresh, he's the head Department of Educational Administration, NEPA, and he is also his specialization relates also to education policy and governance. His experience of research and teaching within the university system spans over nearly 30 years. 25 doctoral and MPhil researches have been completed under him. It's commendable. Besides his engagement in teaching programs of MPhil and PhD, he has been teaching to the participants of postgraduate diploma in educational planning and administration for in-service education officers in India, as well as international diploma program for international participants from developing countries under the ITEC program of the Ministry of External Affairs. He is also the program director of different training capacity development programs. As the head of the department, he has been heading 2 major projects and activities of NEPA. The first one relates to All India Survey of Educational Administration in states and UTs. And the second is the scheme of National Awards for Innovations and Good Practices in Educational Administration. Among other distinctive academic achievements, he's having the distinction of being awarded as Summa Cum Land High Distinction in the course of Decentralization and Governance at the Institute of Federalism, University of Freiburg, Switzerland. Professor Kumar has also served as chairman and member of different expert committees of the University Grants Commission and Indian Council of Social Science Research, New Delhi. He has been a member of different expert committees and advisory governing bodies, research committees of universities and institutions, including human resource centers in the university system. He has been associated with different national and international programs. He has also visited different countries and international collaborative programs, which include Switzerland, Canada, Serbia, Sri Lanka, Nepal, to name a few, I would say. Professor Kumar Suresh is a member of Asia Pacific Network of Researchers of UNESCO. He has also contributed and prepared report on India is a multi-country research study on higher stakes examination and its impact on youth in Asia Pacific region, which includes South Korea, Japan, Philippines, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Tango, Fiji, etc., which was sponsored by UNESCO. He is also a member of Africa Asia Development Research Network of Institutions, a secretariat located at Hiroshima University. So, Professor Kumar, we are really impressed with the kind of work you have been doing in the area of academics, and we are very eager to learn from you your experiences about inclusion in higher education through this session. Most welcome, Professor Kumar. It's over to you. So you can unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. This I consider as an opportunity, and for this I duly acknowledge the kind of efforts being put over there to get me connected to our colleagues who are already teaching the different institution. I suppose that these are the teachers of Delhi University working in different colleges or departments of Delhi University. Definitely, I love to interact with our colleagues on certain critical issues. There could be a number of issues in our own working environment, but the whole idea of equity or diversity, which is also informing the larger context of higher education in India. That is really, really significant one. So when I was extended this invitation, so at the outset, I would also like to thank the center and its director, the team, Dr. Yukti Sarma personally. She also approached me, and she also sent me message. So without giving any second thought, I agreed to this. So though these are challenging days for us, every day we have number of engagements. So despite the things that you are not having offline classes, very limited now, but this is also very, very engaging time for all of us, the teachers of higher educational institution. But the theme which has been selected for discussion today, definitely that is really, really very important and crucial. This is not just an academic exercise, because all of us as teachers of higher education, we keep on teaching, interacting with our student, talking to the faculty, on say attending our professional group seminar conferences. But this kind of deliberation I consider very, very important for all of us, because this is one issue which touches upon our daily life as a teacher. Whenever we enter in our own educational institution, when we enter in the classroom, the kind of situation which we may be subjected, perhaps we may not be able to realize what I'm talking about. But if you go little detail, or to try to understand the entire nuances of the context of diversity and equity, definitely you will be able to make sense or understand that why do we need to have exclusive focus and exclusive attention on this issue. So I'll come to this theme. Dr. Yukti Sarma, how do you propose a kind of monologue, because all of us teachers of education, we keep lecturing, and so I understand that 2 hours have been say allocated for interacting with our colleagues. So how do you propose?
So we can do it both ways. We can, you can from the very beginning have an interactive session if you want, because our colleagues also have lots to share. Some of them are from education, but of them are from co-disciplinary areas. So they have all kinds of experiences related to inclusion and the challenges they are facing in the college as well as in the departments. So if you want to gather some experiences, you can start with in an interactive mode, or the other way is that you present something and after 1 hour you invite some queries or observations.
Yeah, that I think the second suggestion would be better. First of all, I would like to share my understanding about the whole issue, also my experiences, and then our colleagues may keep noting some of the points, and definitely more and more meaningful interaction on many critical issues.
Yes.
So, just I start with this National Education Policy 2020. National Education Policy 2020 very emphatically say mentioned about that definitely we have to address the whole issue of inequality in education. So one, a starting premise is that in our own educational institution scenario, or in the larger context of say education, there exists some kind of problem which all of us have to deal with that problem, and therefore it is talking about socio-economically disadvantaged group. and a specific component, how you can, accommodate each and every, individual, each and every student in our own educational context. So that is very, very important point. But I would also like to go beyond this, because the national education policy, a number of programs emanating either from, say, Ministry of Education now, or its agencies. But what is more important is institutional context. So, of course, we'll connect both institutional level, say issues related to diversity and inclusion, and also how it's interfacing with the wider context, macro context of the whole issue of identity and inclusion, or diversity and inclusion. If you just, just to set the context of our discussion, you might have seen that over the last 20 years or so, number of developments have taken place in the entire area of higher education. And as I have been informed that some of our colleagues, especially from education, say faculty department, they can easily say connect to this issue, that gross enrollment ratio in higher educational institution has increased substantially during the last 20-25 years. We have already entered age of classification. So classification that is already there. And once you go beyond, say, 20% of gross enrollment ratio, definitely that is considered to be, you are moving towards massification of higher education. And now we are also aspiring to universalize our higher education. So National Education Policy 2020 is especially talking about, and it is setting a target by 2035, our gross enrollment ratio would be, that is aspirational goal, would be say above 50%, not less than. And if it's so, definitely this, if the number of students are coming in the higher education institution, so definitely it will have important implication for us. As I mentioned, that it may have a context, macro context of the whole, say idea of equity, derived from our system level issues, but also micro level context. So my focus would be primarily on micro level context of, or institutional level context of diversity and equity. And I would go one step further when we will be also talking about how to deal with the issue of diversity and say equity in our own institutional context. So I have also a PPT. If you permit, I can share a screen so that we can say remain say focused in our discussion. Is it all right,
Yes,
Dr. Sharma?
yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Please.
Okay.
You are not able to, sir?
Okay, it is not visible.
Sir,
Perhaps it is not visible, or
it is not visible right now, sir.
okay.
Yeah, we can't see it.
Just let me try. This is internet. This is, I don't know how it is. Can you share this if I send you through mail?
Yes, sir.
Maybe. Huh?
Yes, sir, you said, but you will have to change the slides also, no, side by side.
Okay. That is there.
Yeah.
So
There is
later.
sir, on your right hand side, there is present now. So when you are doing, is it allowing you to present?
Yeah, that is allowing me to present window, or yeah, that is there. And I have been doing, but why this PPT is not appearing, that is an issue. Though it is already open, so
You have to select the window, I think, the window which shows the PPT, if that could be selected. then the PPT gets presented. But right now
Mhm.
we are not even seeing anything getting presented. So you have to finally click share. There must be a,
Okay. Okay. Let me try again, and if it is not feasible, then
okay.
present your entire screen that is
Yes.
coming.
Then you have
Present,
to
but
select a window, sir. It will give you also option of selecting one window. You select. After selecting
yeah,
the share
yes.
icon will come.
Now it is appearing. I hope.
Yes, sir. Now it's coming.
Okay. Uh, so. So just we start with this whole idea of understanding diversity and inclusion. So first of all, I would like to also discuss about the emerging context of India's higher education. So I already, submitted for your consideration that now the gross enrollment ratio in higher educational, say institution has increased over the past 20 years or so. But again, we are also aspiring to expand our higher educational institution, not only in terms of number, but also in terms of students. So, one of the important context of India's higher education diversity they are also contributing to the diversification in the institutional context of higher education and bringing in diversity on the campus. One important factors which all of us recognize, and we can also make some kind of analysis, that is related to expansion of middle class. If you just see when the entire process of globalization started, this has also, there could be two different ways of, say, approaching the whole idea of globalization. Now, one is, of course, it has led to widespread disparity groups and, say, regions. But at the same time, it has also contributed to expansion of a middle class. And if middle class has expanded, then this expanding middle class has its own aspirations, and some of the aspirations are new in nature. And one of the important consequences of this expansion, as well as a new aspiration, is also increasing a demand for higher education. So if it is so, definitely it is contributing towards growing enrollment across the social groups. And if you just see higher, the Ministry of Education, 2012 onwards, every year it brings out higher education survey report. And if you just see the survey report, you will get an idea that how the number of institutions there is and what is so just I was trying to see the composition of students in terms of enrollment ratio. I could see, if you just see, desegregate the data. So two important informants in this case. One is that a student from different backgrounds are coming now. So this the gap which was already there, it is slightly reducing. So girls are coming more in numbers. A student belonging to scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, OBCs, a student from rural areas, they are also joining in higher educational institution. And if you just see, compare the figures, social gap is slightly getting reduced. It is not that disparity is over. Still disparities, on three important accounts. One is in terms of, say region, another on the basis of gender, yet another on the basis of social group. So on all the three accounts, disparities are already there, but despite the existing disparities, the gap is now being reduced. So one of the important consequences of this is that growing enrollment of social group. So if you just see the literature in social sciences, in 1960s onwards, a debate started. That circle of middle class is now, say, enlarging. And at that point of time, many social scientists argued like that. And therefore, a different kind of voices are coming in from different corners and different, places. A certain of margins who, the people who are at the margin, they have also started, asserting their own rights, their own entitlement. So these are some of the important development, which is very much linked to the whole idea of education, and especially it is important in our own institutional context of higher education. So if the circle of say a student is enlarging, wherein a student from variety of social groups are joining in, definitely they have their own say aspirations, they have their own they have their own response to the kind of situation which they encounter in their day-to-day say interaction with the peers, with the teachers, or their experiences at the institution. If we just approach the whole idea of diversity, theoretically, that is, if we draw or take a cue from moral political philosophy, it is already there that yes, idea of institution providing fair justice, fairness, justice as fairness, or providing a space for overlapping consensus among the groups which are there in the institutional context of higher education. So if it is so, definitely it is also say necessitating that ideally diversity should be respected, it should be represented in the public say domain or in the public sphere, and especially if you are talking about university, one of the important philosophers, Habermas, especially talks about public sphere, institution as public sphere. So here in different groups and communities, belonging to different groups and communities, a student can come, they can interact with each other, they can raise, this should constitute a realm of freedom for exchange of ideas, for exchange of dialogue. So that is definitely important one. So theoretically, the idea is that all those diversities which are informing the context of higher education, that should be respected, that should be represented, and it should be accommodated in variety of ways, be it classroom or hostel mess or public say places within the institution. They need to be accommodated. Of course, accommodation is a larger context, it is a larger concept, and it will require variety of say ways, variety of intervention as the teachers or institutional heads and leaders. So that aspect is already there, but I'll come to this point little later. But if the scenario or situation in higher educational institution is departing from its earlier scene, where in more and more diversity in terms of belongingness from rural areas, from disadvantaged groups, from girls, if they are coming in, they have their own important say aspirations. So it has two important kinds of challenges which diversity is posing for the institutional leaders as well as we as a teachers in the institution of higher education. So first challenge is problems of intergroup adjustment. So since all of us here in national capital, we may not be able to see the kind of problems which are being posed in many other universities. But if you just see it or try to understand or do a kind of underlying, undercurrent of the entire interaction pattern, perhaps you may be able to understand. So intergroup adjustment is definitely is an issue in the institutions of higher education. And a lot of literature, especially those who are from education, they can easily supplement this aspect, or they can correct me in this regard. The data is also suggesting that intergroup adjustment is emerging as a major problem. And therefore, segregated spaces of a student in our own, institutional spaces, be it, mess or dining hall or peer group behavior, sitting together. So this is also due to a problem of intergroup adjustment. So students are bonding together on the basis of their regions, on the basis of their language, on the basis of their social group belonging. So educational institution, if it is institution at public sphere, it is open space to interact freely, exchange the ideas, dialogue, a space for dialogue. Perhaps that will be subjected to a new kind of interrogation in that case. So this challenge is very much important in this regard. Second important challenge is also in terms of creation of new boundaries and enclaves. So these new boundaries and enclaves on basis of ethnic, regional, language, caste and religious group belongingness. And this is really creating a major challenge or emerging as a major issue in the institution of higher education. Fortunately, in recent years, we have not witnessed this kind of, challenge in our own institutional context. But if you remember, even the cases of Delhi University reported in newspapers, as a teacher of the University of Delhi, you may correct me, but there was also an issue wherein this kind of issues were also being brought out, and therefore, a special police cell is already there to address the issues relating to a student coming from northeastern states. Similarly, there could be number. Just I'm submitting just one. Similarly, at that point of time when the violence took place only on account of regional belonging or ethnic belonging of a student, and one student was already killed in Lajpat Nagar areas, if I remember correctly, 4 or 5 years back. And that was a huge, debate in this case. This is not an isolated case. This is really important, because we, in our own institutional context, in the context of higher education, this boundary specification is taking place. So othering, the process of othering, we and other, that is definitely coming in, and it has also created a different kind of situation wherein enclaves are being there. And easily, what is more important point to remember, that in this case, a kind of insider-outsider debates start, be it the case of Maharashtra. Of course, whatever we are discussing, these are not disconnected to the wider socioeconomic context or social economy of education. But it is even in our own institutional context, we can see that this kind of insider-outsider debate that becomes important, and that can create a kind of uneasiness in case of institutional context. And in many cases, as I mentioned, that violence has also been one of the important point in this regard. Intolerance, discrimination of various kinds based on both socially embedded sites of exclusion and new forms of exclusion. So socially embedded, definitely, that is, all of us are aware that maybe based on, say, caste, community, regions. Even you might have seen that in your context, a student coming from a better off family, so in terms of class, they have their own social and cultural capital. If they are coming to your own institution, social and cultural capital, of course, our colleagues from education, they can easily make sense of this, but cultural and social capital, especially in education, it has a specific reference. So they have their own socialization, they have their own capital in terms of network, in terms of linkages, in terms of their initial socialization. So all these are also informing the context of the institution of higher education. This may have two different kinds of situation. One, if children are coming from the similar kind of class situation or economic background, parental background, and they have better social capital and cultural capital, they may be bringing in and adjusting with the institution very easily. But institution, for many students, if there is some kind of lag or disconnect, definitely this create a problem of exclusion for many. So also the roots are traced to your social and cultural or regional belonging. That is one. But there are also new forms of exclusion. We have also seen, and it may be even more apparent in case of the colleges of the university, wherein the whole consumerist behavior and others, they are also shaping the entire youth mentality and others. So what will happen, that market is also important force or an actor in this case, and this is creating new forms of inclusion. So if we do not have that kind of brands in terms of our shoes or our dresses, those who cannot afford, they are also subjected to discrimination, subject to exclusion. That could be very not apparent level, but multi-layered exclusion can take place. And especially literature in recent years, especially in case of school education, has come in, and the implementation of Right to Education Act and its clause of 12C, that is related to reservation for disadvantaged group in public school, or in other words, private schools. So elite schools, students are getting admitted over there, but definitely the kind of culture which is there, because all those students who are going to these schools, there is a complete disconnect between their between home culture and the culture which surround them and the institutional culture. So definitely what is happening, that apparently if they are not being discriminated or excluded, the kind of situation they are subjected to, that creates the situation or sites, or that become a school itself becomes a site of exclusion for this. So definitely the new forms of exclusion is also coming from this kind of situation. So especially this exclusion and discrimination, this is not new. But it is now continuing even in the context of higher education. So understanding the whole idea of exclusion in the institution of higher education, that is definitely called for. And all of us, teachers of higher education, we have to definitely pay attention to this, to understand. Unless you understand the context, perhaps you may not be able to address some of the issues. So of course, I'll be coming to the whole idea how to address this kind of problem. But before identifying the medicine of the disease, it is equally important to diagnose the itself. And therefore, elaborating on this aspect. So as I have already pointed out, that market and society, both could be, emanating from both society and market, that can create the situation of exclusion or discrimination, even if it is not very apparent in the institution of higher education. And if you are trying to say this adversely impact the whole idea of equal access to opportunity in the higher educational institution. How do you say? Just the whole idea of access and opportunity in higher education cannot be approached very mechanically. What kind of access you are talking about? Access is not that you in your own say college or university prospect you have already advertised that this institution is open to all. Anyone who is securing this percentage of marks, they can access the institution. They can access the facility of the institution, be it library, be it mess, or whatnot. So we can take pride in this, that we work in an institution which is open to everyone, and it is say accessible to everyone. But this is very narrow understanding of our understanding about access. Access should be definitely, would be only make sense if it is accessible in substantive term of the whole idea of access and opportunity, not mechanically that you have just announced and you have already written in your prospectus or whatever document you are having with you, and you announce, and it will ensure that everybody is able to access your institution or facilities. So this aspect definitely has to be seen, and therefore this aspect of whole idea is to be revisited, that what kind of disadvantages are there, what kind of exclusionary spaces within the institution say exist in terms of unequal access and inequality of opportunity. I'm not talking about the constitutional language of equality of opportunity. That this is definitely an issue of debate, and all of us teachers of higher education, we have already studied in our own respective discipline, we have experienced it. So it hardly needs additional emphasis to make that the whole idea of equality of opportunities also to be revisited, to be interrogated. It has to be analyzed in a multi-layered reality. Simple pronouncement in terms of equal access and opportunity would not work, and this point has to be underlined in our own institutional context. And therefore, whatever we are talking about, that our institutions are open to all, we are ensuring that as per the caste, category, or reservation, and whatever is there, and even say a student coming from rural area, they are if they are meritorious, they are also getting admitted in our own institutions. But this is not the end. How they are able to access our own institution, this is an issue. And therefore, we as stakeholders of higher education, we as a teacher of higher education, we have to definitely pay attention to this aspect. Whether everyone who is approaching or accessing the institution, our institution, based on merit, whatever merit defined, we have defined and set the parameters of defining merit, whether they are able to access our institution equally, or the equal opportunity is getting translated into working reality. These are deep questions that we as teacher of higher education, definitely we have to interrogate ourselves. And how do we interrogate? You have to understand the entire context of the idea of say equal opportunity and equal access. I'm not talking about philosophical term. I'm talking about our own institutional context. I am reminded of a series of papers which in 2019 or so, when the whole idea of extending reservation in institution of higher education that came in at that point of time, number of articulations, and we are not approaching this issue as say actor over there, but as a researcher. As researcher, if we approach number of few articulations that came into picture, and they say that no, this is altogether different kind of thing, and it will expand. So as in the beginning I say that yes, it expanded the opportunity, but how those opportunities are being realized, that is an issue. How the institutional spaces are being accessed by each and every say entrant to the institution of higher education. This is a deeper question. So all of us remaining in our own institutional context need to see, need to engage, deeply engage with this is and question, and perhaps then we will be able to realize one of the important the literature which I'm mentioning at that point of time, that for or against, that aspect is over. One many of you may be knowing this say position. They say that yes, that debate is over. Now the debate is there that this whole idea of reservation has reached to its peak, and now the students are also coming in. They are getting admissions in elite institutions, be it IIM or IITs or say our own Delhi University or Jawaharlal Nehru University or whichever institution we are talking about. But this is not the end in itself. That aspect is there. So debate has to go beyond that. So if they are able to access this institution in terms of formal access on account of guaranteed equal opportunity, but how far this whole idea of equity and say equal access and opportunities are being realized by them within the institutional context, that is important point to ponder upon. And therefore definitely if you just see in your own classrooms, in your own institution, you may get answer to some of the points. I have been told this is a old formulation in 2004. I keep on repeating. Of course, it is very old one now, given the time frame. Human Development Report of say 2004 talked about two. I like the category and concept that many times people may be subjected to living mode exclusion and participation mode of exclusion. So if we are talking about our own institutional context, what we may not be able to realize that yes, all of them have been admitted now. They have been also given hostel. They have also been provided access. They have been issued library card to access and get this. They can easily, they can go to the canteen, mess, and they can sit in any public space. But what is important in this regard, that the document which I'm referring to, it talked about living mode exclusion. So it is very, very, a different kind of experience. So in day-to-day life, if I'm living in a hostel, and if I'm there in the classroom, if my classmates are not paying any attention to me, not paying attention, I would say that they have very, very, different kind of perception about this, different kind of attitude they adopt in the classroom or in the mess or in the hostel. That is itself, that will create a situation wherein we will be feeling that on day-to-day life that we are getting excluded. If we are getting excluded, you can say that in some of the so-called open societies, I'm not talking about India. If you go beyond India and in some of the open democracies and open society, there could be spaces wherein you feel that this space is not very secure in terms of claim that this is my space. It is not that somebody is coming and saying you that no, you cannot sit here, this is not your space, but we experience this kind of this in our day-to-day say interaction pattern, in day-to-day our say understanding, in day-to-day our I mean contact with different say actors in the institution of higher education or so that is there. Similarly, participation mode of exclusion. So participation definitely in a school education, there are some researches which have already been done, and also now in higher educational institution that is also coming in. So how do you measure the participation? So if you just connect the point which I submitted before you, that there should be a kind of connect between equal, I mean the whole pronounced idea of equal access and equal opportunity and their say operational context. If there is disconnect between they, definitely that will relate to, I mean that will create a different kind of situation. So here in, if I'm talking about the document talked about these two, living mode exclusion and participation mode of exclusion, in a different context, but I'm trying to understand this say concept in case of our own institution, and wherein if students are not able to participate equally in classroom, definitely it is an issue that need to be addressed properly. Whatever policies are in place, whatever programs are in place, whatever interventions are being made by the government, that will not create a very participatory spaces within our own institutional context, unless the enabling institutional spaces are created which could connect to the whole idea of equal access and equal opportunity. So that a point I would like to re-emphasize here. So definitely, I would not like to go into the entire theoretical debate that perhaps that may not be called for, given the I mean, participant of this discussion, all of you teachers of higher education. But quickly, we can just, for our own informed discussion, we can say that yes, liberal notion of equal opportunity and contestation of this, that is very much in place. And even I could see that many of our colleagues whom I could see on a screen, female colleagues, and they can easily say draw some say parallel if they have some I mean idea about neo-left feminist literature like Marianne Young or Nancy Fraser and others. They are also talking about that whole idea of equity you are talking about. But the idea of equity is not informing as working reality in our day-to-day life. You are talking about representation, but that representation is mechanical in nature. It is not substantive representation. That therefore we need a concept which can go beyond the whole idea of equal opportunity. And this idea of equal opportunity has to be grounded. And therefore, Marianne Young specifically, she talks about heterogeneous public. Heterogeneous public means you recognize the differences. You recognize the inequality which exists. You just do not start with the premise that everyone is equal and equal opportunity spaces are already provided and that is end in itself. No, that will not work. You have to first identify that this whole idea of equal opportunity is also subject to interrogation, subject to deeper understanding, and therefore you have to also recognize the idea of heterogeneous public. So heterogeneity, if you are able to recognize, then you have to also find corrective measures, how you can bring together the heterogeneous public. So if another, point, if I draw from Joseph Karen, definitely it is being talked about that yes, there should be even justice as even-handedness. So heterogeneous public are already recognized, but there should be justice of even-handedness. All these are not just abstract theoretical position, but very much linked to our own understanding about institutional spaces. And therefore, even if I'm slightly deviating or entering into the field of philosophical discourses, but definitely it is important for us, all of us, to understand the reality of our own institutional context in a more informed manner. So that aspect has to be taken into consideration if we are dealing with the issue of access and opportunity. And therefore, it is not just simple, but multi-layered, and each layer of this aspect has to be seen, has to be addressed. Only then we will be also able to make intervention accordingly. So I just many already literature suggesting us that there could be complete disjunction between formal equality and unequal condition, or formal equality and substantive equality. So all idea of equal opportunity, equal access in the institution of higher education, though could be pronouncement, that could be formal guarantee, but substantively that not it. Who will make difference in terms of ensuring substantive equality, substantive access, and substantive equal access and equal opportunity within the institution of higher education? The first important responsibility, perhaps to my understanding, I may be important actor, or first important responsibility rests with the teacher. The most, therefore national education policy once again reaffirm the centrality of teacher in the entire educational process. So if centrality of teacher is being recognized, definitely it is also expecting a different kind of. So perhaps we are very much, we can play very substantive role, instrumental role in translating the formal idea of equal opportunity in our own institutional context, equal access in institutional context as a working reality. And therefore, this aspect has to be taken into account. Again, I would not go into the whole idea of theoretical debate. We can come back to some of the discussion, maybe during our interaction about this position. Just I'm also coming to the whole situation of our own higher educational institution. There could be in our own educational institution, if we started with this discussion that our educational institutions are now diversified. They represent diversity of a student composition. There are also recognized sites of exclusion, recognized sites of context and contestation between institutional culture and the culture or aspirations which students from variety of social, economic, and regional background they are bringing in. How to weave together in a more harmonious, constructive manner. Definitely teacher can play important role, and all of us in our own respective way, we are also leaders. Whenever I talk about leadership in higher education or leadership in education, I'm not very much tempted to reduce the whole idea of leadership only to the institutional head, that yes, only vice chancellor will take. No, vice chancellor is of course very important position, and he is again institutional head. He can take important decision and he can ensure. But if we are talking about leadership, all of us, say, initiator of change. If we are able to initiate change in our own working, context of institution, and if we are creating an enabling environment within the institution, that is more important than just intervention from outside. So if it is coming as an institutional culture is really important, way. So in case of a school education, number of literature already available, and there was also debate, especially in case of UK and USA, and that was related to the migrant population. That was a different context, wherein it was about minority immigrant groups, and the children from immigrant groups, if they are getting admitted in public schools, they were not able to come to the level of learning achievement, and that was an issue. And the whole movement of multicultural education came into picture, and the whole idea of curriculum, the whole idea of pedagogical processes in those institutions, that also got integrated, and as a result, the idea of multicultural education also came in, and that paved a way for new understanding about our institutional context in those countries, and therefore, well-defined, parameters of also multicultural education, and subsequent programs in case of UK or USA, to inculcate a different kind of values among the children, to respect each other, to respect diversity and difference. So if I'm talking about multicultural, perhaps that we may take cue from that, or we may derive something. So that is also talking about, 5 important components have been talked about in case of multicultural education. One is that if it is about educational process, there must be content integration. If we are teaching in our classrooms, it should not be alienating for most of the student and just integrating few. So if it is so, definitely we have to revise our pedagogical processes, content which we are delivering in the classroom. That is one. Secondly, it is also talking about that, yes, it is not just about content, integration, but the whole pedagogical processes, and teacher can play a role of transformative agent in the case of higher education or school education, and they can play important role in creating a school culture or institutional culture which can promote. So the idea which is coming in, that institution should definitely be a space of inclusion. Institution should be a place which can enable each and every student. It is not just identifying some so-called bright children, or grooming them, mentoring only those, and whosoever are not coming to your expectation and level. So there's just many times I might have shared with some of the, because in different HRDC and others, I have been sharing this, so that I might have shared. This is a case of IIT. So this was an issue about the learning level of children. All the children got admitted through national level test, but some of the students were not coming to the level. Whatever expectations are there, or whatever minimum benchmark is there, they were not able to share. So one of the, from a researcher viewpoint, one of our colleagues like us, he started studying this, that why these students are not coming to the level, why they are not performing to the level of others. So of course, the whole idea of social capital, cultural capital, that also came in. Because the children who were otherwise very studious, that they were bright and others, but they were not that much communicative in the classroom. They are not able to connect with the teachers. All these issues were there. So the colleague started talking about these children with the teachers, fellow colleagues, that no, perhaps we have to go beyond that. We have to also create a kind of environment wherein those students who got admitted in our institution through national level, so this is a failure of the institution. What we have done with them, we are failing them. Not, they are not failing themselves, we are failing them. So some kind of intervention is required. What kind of role as a teacher we can play in this regard? So some of us, I mean, as a teacher, us, that no, we are giving our best in the classroom. We prepare 3, 4, 6 hours our own lecture. We deliver the lecture, and this is appreciated like anything because we put our effort. If somebody is not able to get our lecture, this is fault of the student rather than us. Why you are pointing on finger on us? We are very honest in our delivery of lecture, and it is not that casually we are going to the institute, classroom and not. So this was a major issue of debate. So here's a kind of, you have to see this whole issue a little differently. You just pick up some of these students who are not able to catch up with the expectation, your expectation. You try to understand there. What is the difficulty? You may, if you have already prepared your lecture for 6 hours, you just spare another 1 hour with them and try to understand. And also, this practice somehow started. And what happened after the semester, those students who were just lagging behind, they were not coming to, were not able to catch up with the standards which was set in the classroom, they performed reasonably well. So this was a kind of say lesson for all the things. So this is just, of course, it may appear as isolated say case, but it is important. It is definitely important, important learning point for us. So as a teacher, if we just take the whole idea of institution, there could be 3 different ways of addressing the whole idea of exclusion in the institutional context and promoting inclusion in the institution. So in this case, what is important for us to understand, that one is definitely about institutional mechanism. How institutional support system is working in the institution. Unfortunately, just I'll share another 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll start discussion, and your feedback and your understanding, your comment and question, that will be most welcome. So what happened when the University Grants Commission came up with the idea of equal opportunity cell? And this was just beginning, 11th 5-year plan, just I could see the document, and it was just the 12th 5-year plan was being talked about. So during that time, what I did, I just talked to the people, and इंटरव्यू कैसे लिए अभी हम लेक्चर में हैं. So that aspect has to be seen in this case. So sorry, little deviation. So CAS interview is going on, so I'm also being called for maybe some consultation. Sorry. So just I was talking about institutional context. So 3 different kinds of interventions are required. One, in terms of institutional spaces. So when this UGC came up with the idea of setting of equal opportunity cell, so I was moved with this idea that is, if it is so, can there be a possibility in all our institutions of higher education to have an a very, very empowered institutional structure to address some of the issues? These institutional structures should not and must not be just grievance redressal kind of mechanism beyond that? Is there any possibility? So from that perspective, I started talking to fellow teachers in different universities, and also started say, हमारा तो अभी 1 घंटा और चलेगा, 5 मिनट का अगर 1-2 मिनट का हम ब्रेक ले सकते, बट दे विल बी वेटिंग ना. तो हम सिलेक्शन कमेटी से अभी 45 से 50 मिनट होगा. हाँ, अभी कलीग्स बैठे हैं सामने, इतने लोग हैं. सॉरी. So the one important point with regard to this. So I organized a number of programs for 5 years related to how we can address the whole idea of identity and exclusion in the institutional context. Can these institutional structure be empowered to emerge as important structure of addressing the issues of inequality and exclusion in our own institutional context? Really, I was really astonished to find that most of the institutional structures which are already in place in different universities, they were just ornamental arrangement in the institutional setting, and they were not actually delivering the kind of mandate they are supposed to. Most of the institutional structures, they were functioning primarily in a mode of grievance redressal. For example, if you just see, some of our female colleagues may be able to understand ICC, Internal Complaint Committee. So that has a well-defined mandate. That yes, if there is any complaint within the institution, that the Internal Complaint Committee will examine the issues in detailed manner, and they will take decision. So if it is so, definitely that is there, and the mandate is defined that it will redress the grievances, will take action and others. But can there be a possibility to see that whatever we are talking about, issue of gender or this, can there be a possibility of creating gender sensitive or gender friendly environment in our own institution? Is there any possibility of bridging the gap between a student or the teachers or the different stakeholders in the institution belonging to different social groups or religious group? How we can bring together and in a better understanding, not in a very hostile manner. So we do not have to depend on grievance redressal. Why we should wait that something will happen and they will enter into this? No, this is the wrong approach. If we are talking about our own institutional context of equity and diversity, and it is in this context that it becomes very, very important for us to understand that our own institutional level structure need to be empowered, and whatever the important derivation or the point emerge or out of our the kind of institutional structure I was talking about, most of them now agreed over the years that no, whatever is being talked about in the context of institution, these are primarily grievance redressal mechanism rather than enabling institutional structure in real sense of the term. If it is, it has to be enabling a structure within the institution. They should act or they should function as support system and positively contributing towards creating enabling environment within the institution. And if a different kind of institutional structures are there, definitely they can come together in a very, very different way. And if aggregated efforts are taken together, they can definitely contribute towards better functioning, better, say, understanding among the student belonging to variety of groups, and that can play important role. Similarly, so one is about institutional structure. Second is also that if institutional structures are there, and if you are talking about equal access and equal opportunity, definitely some kind of monitoring mechanism is required to be in place. So what I did, around 100 say senior faculty colleagues from different universities, they have come to this place. So they also work on say equity monitoring tool. So in equity monitoring tool, in the sense that if you have admitted, you have now, you are supposed to keep data of a student who are coming from which group, which say regions and others, and the tracking is very, very important. Your task as an institution is not over that you get them admitted in your own institution as per the legal mandate and whatever entitlements are there, but how these students who are getting admitted in the institution of higher education, how they are performing in their state. So they prepare a monitoring tool. So at the time of admission, the candidate has secured 80%, 85%, 90, and now 100% also in your case of some of the colleges of Delhi University. So if it is so, how they are performing in our own institution. So tracking of those in terms of attendance, in terms of their participation in different activities, and that can be worked out in your own institutional context. And you see that how these students, especially coming from disadvantaged group. If I'm talking about disadvantaged group, I'm not reducing the whole lot of student in terms of SC, ST or OBC. There could be number of points of disadvantage. So I'm taking disadvantage as a generic category who get or remain excluded. So how do we exclude? So tracking of these students can have important say implication in ensuring that your own institution is helping them and trying to address some of the issues which might have acted as say point of limitation for this. So this maybe in terms of bringing together a different kind of institutional structure at one place and making this institutional structure very, very powerful. But number of sensitization program, number of community-based engagement and others, they can also create, but there is no substitute of inculcating positive value among the student, positive value, keeping and upholding, a sense of justice, sense of fairness, sense of, even-handedness in treating our student. As a teacher, perhaps we would be more effective in ensuring equity in the institutions of higher education. So that aspect needs to be taken into consideration. So these are some of the points I wanted to share with you. I am sure that you have your own very rich experience. All of you are dealing with this kind of issues. And just this, I flag in some of the issues, but these are not the points end in itself. There could be number of possibilities and number of possibilities unfolding out of our own interaction. So what I do, I stop here, and we may have your own view, comments, observation, question, or point to discuss it further. So that will be definitely most welcome.
Thank you, Professor Suresh. It's been a really, really wonderful and an insightful discussion we have had. I think your observations, your experience clearly reflects on so many years you were spent in inclusion in higher education. And we're really happy to have you with us. And it's been a personal journey that you've looked at policy, you have looked at a lot of programs which you have interacted with, and you've shared all your personal interactions also. So I open the house now for discussion. All the participants, please, you can unmute yourself and ask your questions to sir.
May I, Deepa?
Yes, Punita, please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much. Good evening, sir. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for such an informative session, sir. Not even once I felt that it is one-sided. So there was a continuous dialogue emerging out in my mind throughout. So
Okay.
I would be sharing here three observations of mine, if time permits me, and I would be expecting a reflection or a comment from your side on that. Sir, you talked about globalization and its impact on higher education. So I was just thinking that when globalization came, it brought privatization as well. So I just wanted to understand that the role of private school, encouraging the higher education in a particular group, because we talked about the middle class aspiration also. So we just see that the middle class and the lower middle class, most of the population which is lying in these two stratum are fascinated towards the private school system. So, can we understand it that way also, that the private school system also has encouraged the number of participant in higher education? Is it a probable this thing? Because and then it is somewhere threatening also, because the poor group is not able to participate in overwhelming manner into this higher education population. So this, I want your comment on this situation.
Very, very relevant and important say question you have raised. Definitely, I mean, the private say actors or private participation in public spaces, definitely that has been important instrument or important actor in ensuring, be it expanding the enrollment of children in their school education or in higher education. Especially in higher education, it is interesting. I could see that perhaps you have some background of education and you can understand some of the nuances. So in this case, what I'll request you that you see the higher education survey report. What you will find that just 20 years back, our own journey, or 25 years back, number of institutions. Number of institutions during the last 20-25 years substantially increased. I mean, now you have more than 900 universities. You have 49 or 50 say central universities, number of IITs, nearly 50,000 colleges. This number was not there earlier. And if I'm talking about huge number of institutions of higher education, these institutions are not essentially located in publicly funded, say context of higher education. Majority of them are private institutions, be it engineering, say institution or many professional degree institution, and some of the universities also which came into picture during the last 10-15 years. So definitely these institutions have definitely, because our capacity as public institution, I suppose that all of us belong to public institution. Our capacity as public institution is still limited. The kind of transformation, socioeconomic transformation, which has happened over the decades, and it is slightly maturing 1990 onwards, when the globalization process also, it gave rise to expansion and middle class and rising aspiration of middle class. All these have contributed to a different kind of parental say aspiration. Now the parents are not essentially tempted to send their children to workforce. That may be still partly true, but many parents would like to send their say children to the institution of higher education. And you are very much aware that education is one of the most important source of Earlier, it was considered to be, source of occupational mobility, but it is also a source of, say, social mobility. It was only till the decade of 70s or so. People talked about status incongruency, wherein if a teacher or belonging to, or any person belonging to a category of scheduled caste or scheduled tribe, out of his merit or even otherwise, if he or she has come up to this a level, but this level in formal structure, his level is very high in terms of position, but his caste or community position was lower, and therefore there was a kind of incongruence, disconnect between social status and economic and, say, occupational status. But in current scenario, if you just see the kind of changes are taking place, which is also informing and bridging this gap. These are bringing together. So if this kind of changes are taking place, definitely aspirations of parents have also increased substantially, and therefore they see that education could be the most important, say tool to improve their economic position, or even otherwise. So they are sending their children to higher educational institution. But if those children are suddenly entering in the public domain of higher education, perhaps we as public institution would not be able to admit those many students. And therefore, if there is a gap between the supply of the institution from publicly funded institution and the children who are coming to join. So who will bridge the gap? So definitely in this case, private educational institution has come up in good, substantially in number, and that way they have contributed. And in the beginning, I started with a statement that national education policy is aspiring or setting a goal, that is aspirational goal, that by 2035 we will have 50% enrollment in higher education. Very, very, towering goal we have set for this. Who will meet that? Perhaps as a public institution, perhaps we may not be able to meet this target, even though we have mentioned in our public policy document that yes, 6% of GDP will be allocating to education. But in reality, it is not so. You might have seen the budget cut. 5,000 budget of school education has been reduced this year. Similarly, perhaps 1,000 or more so in case of higher education. So this is happening, and gradually the budget is also getting reduced. Even if you are taking aggregated budget of education, there could be different. You are talking about institution of eminence, graded institution, and 1,000 crore you will be giving. But what about the large number of publicly funded? So definitely this is also indicating that perhaps we will not be able to fulfill the requirement or rising aspiration of parents and students who would be aspiring to get admitted in or to pursue higher education. So in this case, private actors would be playing very, very important role. Whether they are, definitely they will be, working with the motive of maximization of profit, or definitely a strict calculation between input and output. So that aspect is already there. But this is a situation which we are not at the moment able to avoid, and definitely we have to have this kind of situation in coming years also. So in given situation, you cannot talk about only publicly funded institution or admission on enrollment of students in only in public institution. And there are number of instances wherein even in case of a school education you refer to, the public the policy is also talking about creating a school complexes. Many of our colleagues may not be able to understand. A school complexes is a kind of institutional structure being suggested that it will be bringing together, say, 10 to 12 school of different levels and different levels of capacity, number of teachers, etc. So that is there. And one of the important point which I am not sure whether you have seen or not, or it has come to your mind. It is also talking about that bundling of private schools. So you bring some private school in this also. So this kind of experiment is already being suggested, and how it will work, I'm not sure, but there is hardly any possibility of reversing the process of the whole idea of globalization or marketization in higher education. In fact, since I'm a little going beyond, I'm tempted to say, so just during last few months, I was just revisiting the whole idea of university itself. And the idea of university, which we borrowed from Oxbridge model, and of course the idea of modern university system from say German Humboldtian idea of university. University was considered to be very, very autonomous space, and say governed by a student and teachers. There was hardly any possibility of third, and university as a site of knowledge generation. This situation is substantially changing now. We are now talking about, graduation outcomes of a student. If students are getting in your institution, many of you may be also involved in this institutional responsibility. So you might have seen that now we have started also talking about graduation outcome of the student. Graduation outcome means that how many students are passing out of the institution. How many students?
That is what I wanted to ask you, sir. We are talking about the enrollment. Are we talking about sustenance in higher education structure also? So that is very important, because recently we have seen in the pandemic situation there was a massive dropout from the schools and higher institute of education. And recently, everybody must be aware of one of the elite college of Delhi University. One of the students, she committed suicide because she was not able to access the gadgets and what other infrastructure was needed for the online classes. So are we talking about sustenance also in higher education? So also,
very, very pertinent question you are asking, Mrs. Gupta. That is really, really important one. Yes, sustainability is very, very important one. But what to be sustained? That is the question. Of course, you are talking about say value of public institution, commitment of say public institution in terms of bringing each and every student in the fold and ensuring equal space in the institution. And you refer to the case of say suicide committed by our one of our students in Delhi. Definitely, this is not disconnected to the larger context of political economy and political economy of education that is there. But even institution, one of my research scholars, she had approached this issue, and she had contributed a paper in World University News, and that was there. She talked about, and I like the idea. She thought that no, institutional support system perhaps not able to sustain the student. And two important submission from your points, or two points you are mentioning. One is about sustainability. Is it possible to sustain the kind of concern we are talking about in case of publicly funded institution? And second is also in terms of ensuring public institution for this kind of issue. Perhaps in both the cases, a big question mark is there. And this big question mark, because your market is also informing. So plain and simple, we are talking about, for example, in our own institutional context, because all the students here, they get fellowship and others, so they do not have any problem, and they have their own laptops and gadgets, and they have been able to manage. And whatever we are teaching in this online mode. But just you just see the only I'm seeing a small faces appearing on my screen. I could not see any of you, so this kind of problems already there. So this digital divide issue is even deeper. And since you are from there, this I may consider as very limited case in case of Delhi University. But you just take the case of many say remote areas. Can you compare your colleges with some of the colleges which are located in backward states like Bihar or say Eastern UP or Orissa, or maybe some of the northern eastern states? Generally in HRDC, I also interact. So yesterday I had a lecture in Mizoram Central University HRDC, and I could see that many of our colleagues, they were very frequently getting disconnected, and the host, professor and dean of the university, she was not able to get connected, and she sent a message that really I feel very sorry that I am not able. So that is of course one of the, so digital divide between regions, say so-called say centers, metropolitan center, digital divide between groups, and definitely this will redefine the space of institution of higher education. We cannot just undermine this particular aspect of the institutional context of the functioning of higher education. And if we are redefining the whole idea of access, equal opportunity, or sustainability in the higher educational institution, this has to be also taken into consideration.
Otherwise, also, sir, we have interstate variation to exist. This digital
Yeah,
divide is the newly emerged this thing. Otherwise, also, when we see in Delhi University students who are coming from other states, we can categorically mark that from all what states people are coming. So not
yeah,
equity and access is not we see the variation, interstate variation also there. Thank you
yeah,
so
I
much.
can understand.
Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
I can understand.
Thank you,
Sir, I
Pooja.
have a question. Can I
This,
ask?
yeah, Smita.
Yeah, thank you
Jay,
so
Go ahead.
much. Yeah, I this is in response to what you said about ICC and not merely using it as a grievance redressal mechanism, but also to sort of enable secure spaces for our students, on campus. I absolutely agree with it, but I'm also wondering because a lot of times we ourselves are not very gender neutral in terms of our interactions. Do you think that there is a way to sort of achieve that, probably through the equal opportunity cells that we have in our colleges? We do have gender sensitization committees, we do a lot of workshops, but even then, I feel that as institutions, we do end up marginalizing people on account of different gender orientations as well. And this I'm experiencing increasingly in terms of the undergraduate population that has started coming to our undergraduate colleges. They're probably better equipped to handle those issues once they go into their masters. But would you sort of like to sort of help us engage with that as well?
Yeah. Very pertinent point you have raised, Dr. Smita. I fully agree with this. I would share my own, say, understanding about this rather than going into abstraction of theory and say this. What I was talking about, that I talked about equal opportunity. For example, in your case, I'm referring to Delhi University. So UGC came up with the idea of setting up equal opportunity cell during the 11th five-year plan. And it was taken, decision was taken that there's this kind of umbrella organization or institutional level structure is required to be in place. But detailed out, propositions were not in place. So what happened, just emanating from the regulating agency, all the institutions were asked to set up equal opportunity cell. I could see that Delhi University, what they did, they established equal opportunity cell in their own respective colleges and say university. But the primary task was assigned to address the issue of say differently abled say students, and definitely that is very very important say issue of concern. And definitely the Delhi University also tied up with say NTPC, and many programs were also enabling program for this. So that aspect is that. But you are raising very very pertinent issue, that institutional structure which we are talking about, whether these institutional structures are able to create enabling environment within the institution, or again it is reinforcing segregation. This is of course a larger issue. We may not have a complete disconnect between our society and institutions. Some kind of linkage is definitely there. We cannot just undermine. But if I borrow the idea of declassing from Marxian, say, literature, many of us, my socialization, very, very, different kind of socialization, but over the years, through my own sensitization in institutional context, in peer group behavior, interacting, studying, and many boundaries we have been able to transcend. A similar kind of interventions are required to be in place in institution of higher education. What is happening in case of UK, in case of USA, they have, violence culture. Gun culture is very, prevalent in these two. Especially in US, that is very prevalent. So this was an issue, and intolerance, frequent violence, all these were. So what they came that yes, civic education program should be in place. The kind of reference I gave to about multicultural education. So civic education, it means a student should be say sensitized. They should be inculcated such kind of value. They should learn to respect. This ICC, I'm really, this is important institutional level structure, but many times I'm not about ICC, but also SC/ST cell or many other cells. These are ornamental, and you may not be, you will be astonished to find it out that what I could see that I had invited all the coordinators of these kind of cells. The kind of I could do under say current reading, what I could see that all those people who were appointed as coordinator or director, they were treating this position as position of privilege, a position of power, rather than informed by the idea of making difference in the life of the institution, be it gender sensitization or say intergroup sensitization or creating enabling. So they would be just sitting over there and enjoying the one exclusive office, some furniture. In some cases, there could be a possibility of having MTS on your disposal. So this is, the attitude that has to be changed. So definitely, if I'm talking about inclusive space within the institution, this has to be addressed, emerged entirely in a different context, and in the what is required that all these institutional structure not merely as ornamental or decorative value in your institution that you have uploaded on your website, that these are the institution, we have this, and once NAC comes for assessment, or you are fulfilling and preparing your SSR or any, you are mentioning that we are this kind of all futile exercise, I would say. It will be better if these kind of institutional structures are not in place. If these are there, they should fulfill, they should revisit the basic idea of this kind of institutional structure. So it is not just a site of power for certain individual in position, but also an institutional structures to ensure that they are able to create enabling environment within the given mandate, be it gender-friendly context, and bringing boys and girls together, trying to create a better understanding between them. And there are instances. My time is not permitting, but there are instances. Since I was able to address more than 100 institutions, so there are a number of institutions also which have successfully working. Just I will name one. For example, Tata Institute of Social Sciences. I could personally see what kind of initiative they had taken. And similarly, MS University Baroda, that was also women empowerment cell, and equal opportunity cell addressing the issue of gender. So when she came to our program, again after 2 years, again she came back. And then I asked that, what are you doing? Once she, gave here, definitely that was very, very important initiative taken by her to ensure that all the girls in the institution, or even in the evening and other hours, they are very much sure. So one is securing the place for girls, but also taking proactive a step to ensure that there is better understanding between boys and girls who are both of them are a student our institution. How can be they brought together in variety of ways through programs and others? So partly succeeded, and she showed the evidence also that how she has been able to transform or change the situation. So this possibility, I always find that this possibility is always there. The need is to intervene with a positive mind, with positive thinking and compassion for certain, idea of inclusion, and ensuring our institution as institutional, enabling institution.
Thank you, Professor Suresh. It's been really, really wonderful to have you with us. And you've rightly mentioned the challenges of inclusion, because the challenges at a government institution and a private institution are very, very varied and very, very differentiation. And I think the participants have also highlighted their experiences of having inclusion in our institutions for so many years. And I really want to thank you from my heartfelt thank you to such a long session, but it's been really enlightening, and having an empowering discussion from the participants has made it so wonderful. Thank you, sir, for your session. I want to thank the director, Pankaj Arora, IIIL, for this wonderful session we've been enjoying. Joint director, Dr. Jyoti Sharma, academic secretary, Yukti ma'am. Also, all the participants who've been listening to our talk since yesterday, who've been with us for the whole session. And we look forward to having you tomorrow with us, and hope it's a wonderful, wonderful session you have enjoyed, engaging, and you have all made it more interesting with your discussions. We hope to have you tomorrow again at the same time. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Have a wonderful evening. Stay safe, stay calm.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Namaskar from my side. I tried my level best to go beyond just academic discussion, rather more engaging as a equal, say, actor in the entire institutional context. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
So can we leave now, Deepa? Is it for today?
I think so.
Because no
Yes,
attendance sheet was. Okay, fine. Bye.
I think they must have taken the screenshots and all. So
Perfect. Okay. Chalo. Bye.
yeah. I think. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Have a safe day.